Hello, and thank you for joining me to continue our journey with developing accessible and inclusive user experiences. Today, we'll deepen our understanding of the fundamental HTML tag structure, then the DOM tree, DOM API, accessibility tree, and accessibility API. By examining a code example, we're going to put our knowledge into practice by going through a code snippet example and then following along to see what's going on with the process that we talked about that happens from the time that the user requests a URL for a web page until the time that that page is being served to the users of assistive technology. Along the way, we'll take a look at a closer look at accessibility implications of three HTML elements that are within our code example. Let's get it started. As mentioned, HTML tags are the essential building blocks of a web page. They define structure and the content. Let's devote some time to revisit the fundamental HTML tag structure to better understand how we can properly use the tag structure, hierarchies, attributes to develop more suitable, accessible user experiences. Here we have a breakdown of the basic HTML tag structure. So we have the opening tag, which marks the beginning or the start of a tag. And then at the very end, we have the closing tag, which shows the end of an HTML element. In between, we have the visible content as well as attributes. Attributes are additional properties within the opening tag. They always show up in the opening tag and they are additional properties and information about an element. Attributes are being presented in the key value pairs. So to put that simply, we have a class with the value of primary. So our attribute name is going to be class and the attribute value is primary. So we might be having ID equal value, we can have name equal value, type equal value. So we have attributes in the key value pairs. This being said, not every HTML element has closing tag. Some of the tags, for example, images, line breaks, and metadata, that the metadata show up inside the head section of HTML document. So they are self-closing, which means they don't have any content in between and everything is being presented inside the beginning, the opening tag. And at the very end, we just have a closing slash, an angle bracket, and a slash inside it. Now that we covered the anatomy of HTML tag, let's take a look at this code snippet and see what's the DOM tree representation of this. So our HTML document often starts with a doc type, which indicates that this is a document within HTML5 format. So we have a HTML tag, which contains all the other elements of an HTML file. It often contains a head section and a body. As you can see, our head section includes metadata information, browser title, and some additional information that often do not show up exactly on the web page, but instead, as we said, is a browser title and all the metadata and stuff, they are being leveraged behind the scene by search engines and other technologies. So within the body section, we have the heading level 1 with the text content of hello world. Then that's being followed by a paragraph tag, and the text content says this is a paragraph. We have a div tag. Our div has a role equal button, and the ARIA labels say close. However, on the UI, what the sighted user can see is simply a capitalized letter X, which stands for closing. Then that is being followed by our image tag, which within the source attribute, we have the value of ping underscore rows image JPEG image and with the alternative text of pink rose. And as we said, these image tags are self-closing, so they don't have an end tag. They just close by having a slash and then closing tag. That is being followed by a div that has a class decorative. And what happens is this div contains or creates only separator. So it's just a bunch of dashes that on the UI they do show up as separator. The result of this HTML code snippet, it's going to be this DOM tree, which browser gonna be creating it. So as we said, DOM tree always also starts with the document object, and then it has the HTML tag and then body tag, and then our heading level 1 with the hello world, and then this is a paragraph. So again, we have a paragraph with the p tag with the text content as such. But here is getting more interesting. So as we said, we have a div with the role button and aria label close, but on the UI we just see the X, right? And this is what's gonna be showing up in the DOM tree. So it means it's a div with the text content of the cap X. That being said, let's move to the image tag. So the image tag has a source URL or path of ping underscore rows.jpg, which is an image. And the div that has a class decorative, and on the UI, we just generate the separator. So therefore, we have a div with a bunch of dashes. So because we just had to look at the HTML code snippet versus the DOM tree that represents that code snippet, let's also take a look at this table because this is very important. So HTML codes are often static markup, right? So they are just text and code written by developers. Okay, so again, they are very static. They won't get updated very frequently, except if the page is reloaded or some new pages is being replaced by the current one. So the HTML code on their own, they're not directly interactive and they are text-based. It's just a bunch of text and characters and it's a linear code, right? So the modification must be rewritten or reload to update the content. Okay, so the purpose of HTML code are they create content and structure, as we have said many times, and the HTML code get parsed by the browser to create and generate the DOM tree. All right, now let's take a look at the DOM tree. It's the in-memory hierarchical presentation of the page. As you saw, it just looks like a tree. It's a hierarchical presentation. It's dynamic, can be updated in real time using JavaScript. We went over this in the previous session. We, as developers, have the ability to leverage JavaScript to get the hold on nodes within the DOM tree and update them, manipulate them as we wish. DOM tree is interactive, and JavaScript gives us the empower us to manipulate and change them. It's a node-based, right? It's a hierarchical tree structure or hierarchical data structure. Okay, so it's modifiable without reloading the page. If some of you are aware of Ajax calls, a lot of JavaScript changes, they do not require the full page reload, which is awesome because you are saving on server calls, client calls, etc. DOM tree manages the structure and allows for user interaction used by browser to render and update the page content. So HTML document, they are parsed by the browser to create DOM, but when we have a DOM tree, they are used by the browser to render and update page content if they are required. Excellent. Now that we completed reviewing the DOM tree structure, let's take a look at the accessibility tree representation of our code example. So as we know, the accessibility tree is based on the DOM tree. However, it only contains information that are important and essential for assistive technologies. So not every element within the DOM will show up inside the accessibility tree. Okay, so for example, if we have a div, span, any generic container that they do not have any role, so they often do not show up inside accessibility tree. All right, now going back to our code snippet. So we had the h1 tag with the hello world text content inside it, and that's what is getting transmitted to accessibility tree. So there is a heading with the content of hello world. We also had a paragraph with the text, so that's what is being conveyed to accessibility tree. Here, we mentioned if we have a div or span or any generic container that they do not have any specific role, they will be ignored by accessibility tree. But here you will see, oh, that a button or close button, it does show up here. So how come? The reason is because originally this div tag is being developed or coded as a div tag. However, it had the role equal button applied to it. And this role equal button conveys to assistive technology as being an actual button. Okay, and because it had the ARIA label equal close, what this accessibility tree will have is not the X, but the X value is being replaced by the close string. Okay, so the experience that an assistive technology user will get interacting with this div component is much more enriched. And the reason is because of the role and because of the ARIA label applied to it. Okay, so we also had image tag. So the image tag had the source attribute with the value of pink rose.jpg and alt text. From accessibility perspective, from SEO and many other perspectives, so alt attribute is important. Okay, because the value inside the alternative text is the one that is being conveyed to the assistive technology users, as well as if the image is broken, if the path has any issue, this alt text is the one that will show up on the UI. Similarly, for SEO purposes, search engine optimization, this alternative text value is being consumed to rank and find that image inside the search engine. All right. So this being said, we have the image tag, but within the accessibility tree, the type of the element gonna be conveyed as an image or graphic. And the alternative text, which is equal to accessible name or accessible label of this element, is pink rose. Excellent. Moving on, we had a div with the class decorative and it was just a bunch of dashes, right? So the class decorative has the ability to hide the stuff from accessibility tree. So what it says is these dashes are there just for the presentation purposes to act as a divider between sections. So there's not much for you to explore and communicate to your users, so simply ignore it. Now that we completed reviewing the accessibility tree, let's take a look at the accessibility API, because as you do remember, accessibility API is the interface between the browser and assistive technologies. So which means these are the most important pieces of data that is getting transmitted to screen readers, to refreshable braille displays, to speech to text software, and etc. All right. So accessibility tree that we reviewed had a heading with the text content of hello world. And as you do recall, accessibility tree only contains information that is relevant and essential to assistive technologies. Okay, so when we're talking about accessibility API, we want to only focus on the heading level 1 and see what type of metadata is getting conveyed. So remember, we went through name, role, actions, values, and states. These are some of the attributes that Accessibility API present. So at this point, we have accessible name of the heading level 1 as being hello, comma, world, exclamation. So that's the name or accessible name of this element. The role is a heading, and from the actions that are possible, so it says click ancestor. So as you can see, this is array of actions. Okay, so HTML elements can contain multiple actions. That's why they're being presented with array. Similarly, we have states. States is also an array of. While there are still a lot of concepts to learn and explore, this is it for today. And I would like to thank you again for taking the time to continue your accessibility journey with me. Until the next session, goodbye.